Great. Without a pencil. Right. So let's just see what we have because I think we are ready to go. So finally, I just want to make sure technically, in terms of audio, we're going to run what I always do, which is I'm going to stay at the podium. And there's just one small new feature here today for the in-person students. But Gurnham, do I sound nice and clear now? And you see me at the podium, of course, right? With the map in the background, and great. And on YouTube, we're good. So everything's holding there. Excellent. Okay, welcome everyone to Short History of the World, our seventh class this semester and our final class before the break next week. So everybody will have some time off next week, and I will be seeing you in 2 weeks from today. So I hope you have a great reading week next week. But what I'd like to do today is catch up in terms of some very critical content. And so we're going to start momentarily with all of that. And I want to make sure that we're following our format as usual. So the first thing I want to do is make sure that we get our on board going with the notes. And thankfully today, we're a little bit better because the strike has ended and we can start getting things working a little bit better. So now I've got the smart board up on the big board. So our notes are going to really be featured for all of the in-person students. And so that means that whoever is the scribe today, the note taker, is going to be even more important because your notes are going to be clear for everybody at all times, and we can work with those. So who would like to be the scribe? For not only are all of you going to get 5 out of 5 today just for being here, and you don't have to do anything after because there's no discussion board number 7 because it's break next week. So all you have to do is be here and stay focused and I will take care of the rest, but I know how hard it is to stay focused, so I will do my best to keep you focused however I can. So you do not need to do a discussion post today. But for the scribe, there's an additional incentive. Not only do you get 5 out of 5 like everybody else just for being here, but then in the next class we have in 2 weeks, you will have automatically 5 out of 5 for having done the notes today. So you're going to get 5 out of 5 twice for class 7 and class 8. Exactly. You see? Watch this. So there we go. And what's your name? Aaliyah. Great, Aaliyah. Okay, so could you please write on that, just put the date, okay, which is Friday, October the 17th, 2000. Oh, it's right on the left, yeah. Have you used the board yet? Yes. Okay, great. So Friday, October the 17th, 2025. Can you write that up there? And then we'll just take this step by step. For all of you in the Cosmos, could you please now enter your full names in the live chat for me so I can monitor this properly as always? Thank you. Oh, nice. You got some good handwriting. Way to go. It's Aaliyah? Aaliyah, what's your last name? Hartwell. Yeah, Aaliyah, of course. Aaliyah Hartwell. Okay. So could you just write down on board and then put your name first, and then for all of you who are here right now, this will definitely get your 5 out of 5 because I know you will have been here. Please go ahead and write your name there. And if for some reason you leave the class before it ends and I notice, your 5 out of 5 is going to start dropping quickly. Okay, so if you need to leave the class, please tell me in advance so I know. But please don't just ghost the class. It's going to hurt you in marks. Excellent. So for those of you right now in the Cosmos, everyone is getting their names on the board, and we have a good turnout today, actually, which must mean that the great Blue Jays feeling is starting to lift everybody's spirit. Listen, I'm a fair weather fake fan like my wife, but who could not have been just absolutely, captivated by Mad Max last night on the mound? It was an amazing moment in sports history, what we saw, and I'm sure all of you are aware of it. It was a beautiful moment in sports. So we'll talk about that in a moment. So there's a good turnout. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 or 17 students in person. And then there are the 8 or so in the Cosmos. So that's a nice class. And then there are all of you out there in another solar system who will be watching the recording as well. Today is a day of critical content. So I'm going to be delivering a lecture in a moment on some things that really matter. But let's just take this slowly. Names are still getting there. But let's see. Does anybody have anything they would like to bring to the class's attention right now? Yes. The first, yeah. Would you want to just come up a little closer? That's all. Just sit in a desk. Yeah, or you could. Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Yes. The format? No format for this one. Just 725 to 750 words, identifying the 3 most important developments and 3 milestones. That's a word that a student has used. It seems to register, maybe because that's where this student likes to eat. I think it's a restaurant, milestones. It's a good word. So yeah, you don't, so there's no, we're excited. There's no research I'm asking for yet. I just want you to write a longer discussion post, essentially. Okay, that's really what you're doing. But in the second half of the semester, there's going to be a format. I'll be at. Okay, so not to worry. Good question. Okay, before we start, does anybody have anything else they'd like to talk about or ask about? The critical questions now, of course, are around your marks, as they always will be. And you should know that you'll be receiving a midterm grade next Tuesday. And that is worth essentially 32.5%. So if you add up the 7 discussion posts that are worth 2.5% each, and you add up the 15% for your first assignment, you'll get 32.5. And that 7th discussion post is, well, it's I'm giving it to you, essentially, that 5 out of 5, in part because it's going to make my record keeping easier. There you go, 32.5% for next week. And let's see what else needs to be dealt with in terms of a little bit of housekeeping. Great, we have Aaliyah on the notes. So normally, before I begin a class, I always like to kind of acknowledge a current event of some sort, if we have time. I'm not going to acknowledge anything particularly big in terms of global history or human history, but maybe something kind of more significant for us, which is that moment last night on the pitcher's mound, plus everything else. How many of you watched the baseball game last night? Any of that game? The Blue Jays? Just even saw any videos? Aaliyah and Olive? Yeah. Did you like what you saw? Yeah. Pretty good.
It startled me from nearly being asleep.
Yeah. Okay. So it startled you. That's good. Do any of you, at least the ones who saw the game, did you feel that something special happened in that moment when the Blue Jays manager, came out to the mound to tell the pitcher, who's a 41-year-old warrior, we might say. He's been pitching for a long time. He's an award-winning pitcher who's pitched for many teams. And last night, he defied his age and injury, and he pitched an amazing game. But then the moment came when the manager walked out to the mound and did what he normally does with pitchers who are in need of maybe a little rest or replaced. He said to Max, the pitcher, "I'm going to replace you now." And normally what happens is the pitcher who's been in the bullpen down at the end and the other's getting ready to come out and relieve, they come out and relieve the pitcher who's leaving. What Max did was something that I'm sure you've seen some videos of, because you're going to be hearing about this. As soon as he saw the manager coming out, he kind of shouted out, "No!" Like, "You're not going to take me out of the game." And then the manager got to the mound and he put his nose into the pitcher's face, because that's what you normally see. It's very intense when people talk in baseball. You know, umpires and managers, they get together. It's like face to face. And you see this wonderful moment of John Schneider, I think is the Blue Jays manager, saying to Max, his last name escapes me, you know, time to go. And Max shouted in the manager's face and said, "Let's go. Like, I want to keep going. I'm ready to strike out another guy." And this was in a critical moment. This is in like almost the World Series. I mean, this is high stakes stuff. And normally the player would have to follow the manager, and the manager might start shouting at the player. Manager said, "Okay, Max, you stay in." Walked away. The pitcher stayed on the mound, defied his manager. Batter came up, struck him out. And the inning was over. So he basically was saying to the manager, "I know what I can do. Don't pull me out of this. I'm going to do it. I can make it." And he put all the pressure on himself. He struck the guy out right afterwards, walks back into the dugout, and all the players are just all over him. They love him for what he did. He basically showed what he's made of at that moment. And he did it in front of a huge live television, audience and a high stakes. So you gotta watch that video, okay? It's called Mad Max on the mound, because he's known as a pitcher can be quite emotional and a little bit crazy, but he's also a brilliant pitcher. So there you go. Did you see that moment? Yeah. Did it strike you that maybe you're seeing something kind of different here?
Oh, I figured that he was going to yell at them until he kept him in the whole game.
Yeah.
Think he was going to let anybody take him out of that game.
Yeah, he eventually was taken out, but he was really into the moment, And I hope that all of you will remember something of that little moment of history, because I hope you can get into something that you really love, that you are so good at, that nobody can move you from the mound right now. You're ready. I'll just conclude by that little story by telling you one small lesson from history about what has been said that might be the most important force in human civilization. Jacob Bronowski, a historian I love to quote from time to time, who wrote a very important book in the 1960s called The Ascent of Man, that was made into a television series, became one of the first documentary series in which science was beginning to be popularized. This is long before Neil deGrasse Tyson, Carl Sagan, and others. And you know what he said, Jacob Bronowski? The most important force in human beings? It's not sex. Nope. It's not hunger. It's not religion. It's not science. It's when we take pleasure in our own skill.
So what was the last word you said?
Jacob Bronowski?
What was the last word?
Pleasure in our own skill. Think about this for a second. last night we saw on a baseball mound at a critical moment an athlete, a decorated athlete, saying, I love what I do. I know I'm good at it. Let me do what I know I'm good at, and I will make everybody happy, including myself. Pleasure in his own skill. How many of you have ever experienced this sense that you're becoming good at something? You're getting better and better at something, and you start to really feel kind of empowered by that. Has anybody felt that here? Raise a hand. Kevin? Lon's raising a hand. I mean, I'm part of the class. I just want to check for a moment here, because what I just saw makes me want to run out and cry. But I'm going to, for a moment, go, I'm not sure the students are really listening right now, so I'll repeat this. How many of you have experienced that feeling that you're good at something and you feel stronger and stronger and you want to get better at it, and you just want to keep doing that thing that you're really good at? You know it's good, you love doing it, and you're going to learn how to do it even better. How many of you have experienced this? And I'm expecting you're hearing me now. Raise a hand. Let's see online. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 ish. No, no, no. Yes, no, and no. Okay, this is good. Now we got a real class going. But I'm going to lecture in a moment. Who went into the cosmos here? Katie, Shamim. So I'm going to assume that the rest of the cosmos has not experienced that. Well, I'm going to do something that I know is going to get your attention. Now, you don't have to refuse this, okay? I don't want to make anybody uncomfortable. Would you like to come up and talk at the podium? Yeah. Well, why don't you come up? Okay. So just a second. We're doing something here that is experimental, but I think it's very instructive and useful. Could you just stand here for a second and so they can see you? And there we go. We'll see you on YouTube in 2 or 3 seconds. Okay. And let's see. You're going to walk in. There we go.
Oh,
okay.
That is extremely delayed.
Okay. Yeah. Now, do you feel uncomfortable being in front of the camera right now?
Yeah.
You do. Okay. And would you like to go sit down? You don't have to stay here. I'd like to talk to you for a second.
I'm fine.
You're okay? Okay. Now, what's your name?
Gerbier. Gerbier.
Gerbier? How do you spell that?
G-U-R-B-I-R.
G-U-R-B-I-R. Okay. I think what Gerbier is doing personally is very brave right now. Okay? You've just, first, you acknowledged something honestly, and you said that you've never experienced pleasure in your own skill. And then I asked you to come up and stand here. So I'd like you maybe to experience pleasure in your ability to communicate for a moment. So why don't you just try and tell us off the top of your head, using, language coming out of your mouth, just you, Gerbier, what has been sort of the most interesting part of this class for you?
I do like the discussions.
You like the discussions?
The activities we do.
And why?
It's nice to, talk about stuff.
Uh-huh.
That interests you.
Go on. What kind of stuff is really sort of important to talk about, would you say?
I do like the whole history part of this.
Mm-hmm.
I like art history. That's something I like.
Oh, you do? You like art history? Art? Why art history?
I'm in art program.
Oh, okay. So is it fair to say you might be a bit of an artist inside? Huh. Don't you think it's important that artists start to respect the fact that they have this creative impulse and maybe others don't, and that's something kind of powerful that you have. You ever thought of it that way?
Not really.
No. Have you ever created anything that you liked?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Huh. Now we're onto something. Can you just tell everybody here the thing that you created that you liked? What was it?
I made a painting.
Mm-hmm.
Digital painting.
Yeah.
I liked it. I got good marks on it.
And how did you feel when you got the good mark?
I thought it was good.
But more than the mark, did you like it?
A little.
A little. Do you want to do better at it? And be really good at it?
Yeah.
Huh. So you do like to be good at something.
I don't think of it like that. I think of it just like, this is fun. I want to do it more.
Have you ever wondered where that desire comes from? Isn't that amazing? You have it. Not everybody has that, but most do, somewhere in them.
Yeah, it's just not something I think about.
Okay, I don't want to torture you any longer. Unless you'd like to add to the rest of the little discussion here about, the fact that what would you like to improve in the future with this skill? Like, where do you want to go with this?
I want to get a job.
What kind of job?
In art.
Yeah. Okay. I think just by you coming up here and taking a few questions from me, that you might have seen something, maybe you haven't seen, which is you actually have in you the desire to be good at something. And that thing you take pleasure in. It's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, keep at it. And you know what? Even if you try not to do it, you're going to want to do it because you're human. The human wants to be good at something.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for taking some questions. Okay. Oh, just a tiny demonstration. A tiny little demonstration, I hope, that might resonate, which is that in every single person, in some form or another, that impulse is there. And that's what Jacob Bronowski was trying to put his finger on. You start to tap into that, soon you're going to be on the mound somewhere, and you're going to be saying to your boss, don't tell me what to do. Don't pull me away from this. I know what I'm going to do now. It's going to be really good. I'm going to strike them out. But that's down the road, Herbert. That's down the road. Does that make sense, or what I'm saying? Yeah. Okay. So I think we need to begin this lecture, but is there anything anyone would like to add online before I begin to come back to what really matters today? And that is this little lecture that I'm going to do for you. Okay, so let me just get this out here. I've got it all straightened out. And everybody should see this. And so I'm going to talk for a little bit. I'm going to be a bit old school and lecture for the moment, but I'm going to try and do it in the most multimedia way that I can. And I need to catch up. If you take a look at this story that we are exploring this semester, we've fallen behind. We just started talking about civilization last week, and then I went on a bit of a nice paddle down a creek and a river with Avery Rose and others to understand what civilization really means, to come up with a definition of civilization, because I thought that it's a very important thing to touch on. Normally, I would have given a longer talk. Today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of collapse civilization, awakenings of power, spells of our God Kings, and a greater world, kind of into some critical moments I'm going to touch on so that I can bring you up to the critical moment that we're going to start talking about after the break. after the break, and that's called the conquest. Now, this should work today. There's the map. Great. I'm going to go back and forth between the map and these images that I'm going to be bringing up. And we're going to look at some videos as well. And I'm going to read from some books. And this should be a multimedia lecture that will feel more alive, perhaps, than you've had before. Essentially, when you come back from break, we are going to begin at about 1492. That's called the 15th, or the we would call that the 1400s, or the century would be the 15th century after Jesus. So 1492 is where we are going to be starting at that point. I need to get you today up to that point. So I'm going to cover about close to 2000, no, about from 399 BCE up into 1492. So that's about 1400, about 1800 to 1900 years. I'm going to cover a big chunk of time, and I'm going to try to help you to understand how we got from forming these smaller communities around rivers, how the empires began to form around these rivers, and then gradually how we awakened to power that I've touched on, how the spells of the god kings or the totalitarian temptation began to return, and how then we began to open up to a greater world after that, so that you understand how it is when you come back from break that two halves of the planet came together. And I touched on that last week, but now I'm going to put it into kind of a chronology. When you come back from break, you're going to see how the Eastern Hemisphere, which is Afro-Eurasia, do you remember that from last week? Afro-Eurasia is going to meet the Western Hemisphere for the first time, and that's the Americas. So we've broken into the broadest way possible in looking at the development of human civilization. We're looking at these huge land masses, Afro-Eurasia and the Americas and the Atlantic Ocean. And remember, this map is not to scale, but it gives you a good visual sense nonetheless. The question you're going to be asking yourself when I show you what happened when Christopher Columbus and others began to come over and bring these two great land masses together, bring human civilization together to form the beginnings of a global world. That's going to be the beginning, the real beginning of the global world, when the world gets knitted together, the Eastern Hemisphere and the Western Hemisphere. And the question you're going to be asking then is, why did it have to end so violently? Why were so many people and communities destroyed in that process? Why could it not have been different? Why could it not have been that the Afro-Eurasian societies coming over, meeting the indigenous societies of the Americas, why could they not have actually worked together? Or why could it not have gone in a different way that would not have led to such terrible destruction and violence? But at the same time, it also put in place some important things. So hold your question for a sec, Olive. I just want to make sure I cover this. Being able to understand why that happened requires us to go back in time a little bit further to understand the critical moments that will take us up to that point when the global world began. We're living in the global world right now. It has been knitted together largely through scientific discoveries leading to technological progress. It's allowed machines and ships and trains and other things to link us. But the linking of these parts of the world started most intensely after Christopher Columbus came over and discovered the Americas. So the question we need to ask as we go back in time is, what are some of the important moments that took place between the time that civilization began up until this point when these two parts of the world come together. What was happening in the Eastern Hemisphere and what was happening in the Western Hemisphere at this time? So the critical date I want to bring us back to right now is the starting line, 10,000 years ago, okay? We touched on that last week, but I'm going to try and stick to today the timeline. We went off on a big theme last week about what is civilization. Well, now civilization is really beginning and is going to develop and accelerate. And I want to make sure that there's some really good structure for you today in terms of time, so you will understand sort of the development of human society through time up into the conquest. So we're starting, and we're going to review quickly at the starting line, 10,000 years ago. We know that the human societies that began, the ones that had a head start, were the ones that were closest to the rivers, that had the most temperate climate, that could allow for the best crops to be grown and the best animals to be domesticated. And essentially what we saw, and I'm just reviewing quickly for you, is that around the world between 10,000 years ago, the beginning of food production, up into the coming of Jesus, which is 2,000 years ago, we have a kind of a period of time there, about 8,000 years, in which a lot of things took place. And I'm going to try to tell you what the milestones are, the really important points. The first thing you need to understand is around 5,000 years ago, let me bring the map back, okay? Because we're going to keep this sort of big picture view as I go through the important developments with some pictures and videos. But around 5,000 years ago, we saw in the world a series of what we would call heartlands. These are areas where there was great food production taking place, one way or the other. We would call these the heartlands 5,000 years ago. And the heartlands were, of course, Mesopotamia, land between two rivers, where Iraq is today. Remember where I showed you in previous classes? We saw the emergence of societies in that part of the world. We saw the emergence of societies around the Indus River as well, in what would become India and Pakistan eventually. We saw the emergence of these heartlands around the Yellow and Yangtze rivers in China. We would eventually see this taking place around the Nile River in Egypt. We also saw across the ocean in the Americas, not quite the same level of development, but something different happening there as well. And societies were forming there. So essentially what we had, if you look at a picture of the world 5,000 years ago, you would have seen these pockets of human societies developing in these parts of the world. And they were largely isolated from each other, largely isolated. This is a very important moment that you're looking at. It's a picture of something that took place in Greece in 399 BC or BCE. So the terms that I'm going to use in terms of time reference right now, I'm going to use the old term, which is BC. But just for the sake of clarity, the whole timeline that I'm giving you today is related to Jesus of Nazareth. The coming of Jesus is a very important moment in human history. The Christian world, or Christendom, the society and the empire that's going to grow from the emergence of the Christian faith, is going to become the dominant power in Eurasia quite soon. And I will explain that. But what I need you to understand is the timeline here all relate to this individual or this idea called Christianity. And so we generally say BC, meaning before Christ, or more commonly today, we will say before the Common Era, so that we remove the religious meaning of that. But it's still the same thing. We're still talking about Jesus. BC, before Christ. BCE, before the Common Era. They mean the same thing. I'm going to use BC. AD means Anno Domini. It's Latin for the year of our Lord, the coming of Jesus, when Jesus was born. So that's how we generally divide time in when we talk about the world's history today, chronologically. We talk about BC and AD. Before Jesus, when Jesus came, before the Common Era, or the Common Era. And I'm just going to say BC and AD. Clear? Everyone got this? Okay. 399 BC. Just in the twilight of the great Athenian Golden Age in Greece, which we touched on last week, I tried to introduce to you the idea of why what happened in this place called Greece, and particularly in this city called Athens, is so important in the human story. Does everybody remember that? Clear? And you probably have heard this in previous history classes too, to some extent. But I want to put this more in context for you. And I want to read you something that is so important in history. This is the moment that you're looking at. It's a very famous painting. Has anyone ever seen this painting? Do you know what you're looking at? Gooper? Yes. Sorry, I'll get it. Go ahead. Yes. So you seem to know more than you seem to let on. You're absolutely right. And who's that philosopher? Yeah, Socrates. Maybe you should come back here and we'll teach together a little bit. Wow. Amazing what you learn from students when you start talking to them. And you answer a question, which is even better. You know, you're absolutely right. Socrates was, and still is, a figure in human history that is important to all of humanity. In 399 BC, in a jail just near Athens, he made a decision. And we know this is true. We know this happened. He was given a choice to either renounce all that he had been saying and all that he'd been talking about, because the Athenian authorities, largely the Spartans, who had clobbered the Athenians in the Peloponnesian War and were setting in place a new government that was much more restrictive. The democratic kind of movement that had happened in Athens was now over. And Socrates has kind of been the sort of figurehead of this movement, somebody who really represented the free mind, free thinking, inquiring, challenging, asking difficult questions through his what's called the Socratic method, always challenging people. He was told by the new authorities, you either now apologize and renounce what you said, or you kill yourself. You drink the hemlock that you will be given. You have a choice, Socrates. He was put on trial by these new authorities as being a kind of renegade and danger to this society. And Socrates, as you probably are aware, in some form or another, chose death. Now, we have an account of his death. It's called The Last Days of Socrates. And it was written by one of his students. And his student, of course, was Plato. You may have heard of these three names before, the great Athenian philosophers: Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. They all come in that order. Socrates came first. He didn't write anything. He talked. Plato wrote. Plato was a student. And then Plato taught Aristotle. And Aristotle wrote. And they all were these incredibly diverse intellectuals who were leading a new way of thinking about the world philosophically, which is that we individuals have the power to know everything. If we just use our common sense, if we just use our critical thinking, we don't need the God kings. We don't need the priests. We don't need the big daddy, big mummy. We just need our brain, our common sense, our sense of inquiry. And we can know a lot. It was the birth of science. It really was the birth of scientific thinking. And it was led essentially by these three individuals, but there were many, many more. The remarkable thing about these three, led by Socrates, was that Aristotle is going to go on to teach one of the great god kings in history, and his name is Alexander the Great. And you may not have understood that there's a direct connection between the conquest of what Alexander the Great, a very young man, one of our great warriors in history, in the way that he took his armies from Macedon, just north of Greece, conquered Greece, absorbed the Greek ideas, and then began to conquer the Persian world and moved eastward and established one of the first great global empires in his 20s, no less. He had been awakened to an enormous power because Aristotle had largely been his teacher. Aristotle had been brought from Greece over the border between Greece and Macedon by Alexander's father, King Philip, to teach Alexander all these great Greek ideas. So Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, all these, they're very important. And the decision that Socrates made to die for the cause speaks through the centuries, speaks through the ages, speaks to all of us as a moment when a human said, my free mind is more important than anything. If you want to take away my mind, if you want to make me think what the government wants me to think, if you are challenging and trying to force me to apologize for something I know is not true, if you are trying to deny me my ability to think freely and speak freely, I would rather die. We are all, to some extent, the beneficiaries of this courage. Well, listen to how he went to his death. I think this is a remarkable moment, and what we have is a kind of eyewitness account.
Are you telling us one of the people in this image here is his student?
Well, who do you think Socrates is in this image?
I would assume he's the one right at the bottom there, bottom right.
He's the one on the bed
Oh,
with his finger up and his robe sort of down and his chest off, and that's Socrates, and he's lecturing. He's speaking to his students. Many of his students came to his jail cell at that moment when he had made his decision. They were there to be with him for his suicide. That's what you're looking at. All these people around him on the bed, they know he's going to die. And he's being given the hemlock in the image. Can you see that clearly? He's been given the hemlock. He's about to drink the hemlock. They're going to watch him die. Now, Plato, it is said, was so distraught by this, Plato had been among the students, that he couldn't bring himself to be there. So the account that we have of this moment comes from another student who was there, who recounts to Plato what he witnessed. And then Plato kind of wrote about this, and he might have been dramatizing this a little bit too, but this is largely an eyewitness. It's a witness account. It's Plato writing secondhand because he's getting an account from Crito, one of the students whom you will hear in a moment, who was there, and he's telling Plato after, this is what happened, and then Plato wrote the story. Does that make sense? Well, listen to this. I always love to read this because I think it tells you something about the courage of a human being, and there is something Christ-like in this. I'm not a Christian. I'm a Jew. But I have great respect for all religions. So please do not think that when I speak of Jesus or Christ that I'm in any way diminishing other faiths or even my own. After all, Jesus was a Jew at the beginning until he became a rebel. But this is kind of Christ-like. 400 years before Jesus went to his death for his free mind and his desire to serve humanity and for his desire to create equality among humans. That was a great driving idea of Christianity, was this sense of human equality and love. Well, Socrates was already there 400 years earlier. However, the Greek society was still quite patriarchal. There was some freedom, but not for everybody. But they had awakened to some new ways of thinking. And this is definitely a new way of thinking. So here's the account that's being given to Plato by his friend, who was among those with Socrates in 399 BC in those early morning hours as he's getting ready to drink the hemlock. So we waited, discussing and reviewing what had been said, or else dwelling upon the greatness of the calamity which had befallen us. For we felt just as though we were losing a father and should be orphans for the rest of our lives. Meanwhile, when Socrates had taken his bath, his children were brought to see him. He had 2 little sons and 1 big boy, and the women of his household, they too arrived. Women don't have the equality yet. So as great as the Greeks are in opening the door to greater thinking, it's just the door is being opened. There's still a long way to go before human dignity really is going to be celebrated. But we're starting on that road to more free thinking, more openness, and more respect for everybody. He talked to them and gave them directions about carrying out his wishes. And he told the women and the children to go away, and came back himself to join us. It was nearly the moment that we had all dreaded. He had spent a long time inside the bath. He came and sat down fresh from the bath, and he'd only been talking for a few minutes when the prison officer came in and walked up to him. The prison officer. Socrates, he said, at any rate, I shall not have to find fault with you as I do with the others for getting angry with me and cursing when I tell them to drink the poison, carrying out the government orders. I have come to know during this time that you are the noblest and the gentlest and the bravest of all men that have ever come here. And now especially, I am sure that you are not angry with me, but with them, the government, because you know they are responsible. So now, you know what I've come to say, Socrates. Goodbye, and try to bear what must be as easily as you can. And as the prison officer spoke, he burst into tears and turning around, went away. Socrates looked up at him and said, goodbye to you too. We will do as you say. Then addressing us, he went, what a charming person. All the time I have been here, he has visited me and sometimes had discussions with me and shown me the greatest kindness, and how generous of him now to shed tears for me at parting. But come, let us do as he says. Someone had better bring in the poison. If it is ready prepared, if not, Tell the man to prepare it. We don't know for certain how much embellishment Plato was giving to this in his writing of this. He loved Socrates. He couldn't be there to watch his mentor leave this world. Perhaps in some details, he's embellished, but not in the sentiment, not in the feeling, this feeling of love for this person. And I would say to you that what you're seeing that is very important is human gentleness. You're about to see, as I go forward in the story around spells of our god kings and all the warriors and emperors and kings and queens who come, you won't see a lot of gentleness. What you're going to see is a lot of violence, a lot of oppression. But you have to remember that the Greeks understood something that I think is fascinating. Pericles had said this. Pericles was the great Athenian leader who led Athens after the defeat of the Persians in the Persian War. He got them ready for the Peloponnesian War, which they eventually lost. However, in between the Persian War and the Peloponnesian War, he rebuilt Athens into this great city of democratic and freer thinking, and it became a kind of lamp of humankind, as some historians have said. And Pericles had said, to repeat what I said to you last week, slightly out of context, you can be a lover of beauty and still be strong. Loving beauty does not make you soft. But in a lot of human societies, we will see through history, through the early societies as well, these kinds of hard men in power, god kings, authoritarians, autocrats, as you will see, who somehow think that beautiful things, gentle things, make you weak. No, they don't. This is what Socrates was trying to say too to us. When you believe in something very strongly, the idea of freedom, you love that thing, you are very, very strong. You will be prepared to fight. You will even be prepared to give your own life. And we're about to see this happen with other figures in history too. I just want to stop for a second. Sorry, Olive, I just want to make sure you get this content, okay? I just need to, and then I'll come in a second. I just need to get this. The critical idea that Socrates gave us has been expressed very well by a novelist and historian of the 20th century, H.G. Wells, a science fiction writer, early science fiction writer, who also was a world historian. And he spoke of this early idea that the Greeks spoke to, largely Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and others, the idea of free thinking, which is you are not awake to your own power. Each and every one of us is only awake to their own power when they recognize the power of their voice, when they recognize the power of their free thinking, and when they recognize their ability to give their life for that too. We all have that power. The question is, are we ready to tap into it? Are you ready to tap into your free thinking? Are you ready to devote yourself to it and even give your life to that idea of human liberty? When you are, you have immense power. Okay, I'm going to stop for a moment and just conclude the awakenings of power part. And I want to go through spells of our god kings and a greater world. But sorry, go ahead. You have a question? And then I'll start another chapter very quickly.
I just want a quick look at the book that you were reading out of, because it just seems really freaking interesting.
Last Days of Socrates. Go ahead, write it down, and you can easily buy that for probably $1 online.
Which page were you on?
Go to the end, Last Days of Socrates, and there's been 3 accounts here, 3 small works by Plato when he's writing, but there it is.
Whoa.
Okay, that's great. You're thinking now and engaging with a very important mind in human development. This is an image to begin this idea of the next chapter, which is Spells of Our God Kings. I want to start in the American world, and I want to move ahead. So we've just left Greece, and we've left this moment when Socrates has given his life, and essentially what will happen to Greece, we will see take place in one form or another in all parts of the world, which is that the idea of a freer way of thinking, the idea of challenging authority, the idea that there is another way of governing ourselves than a divinely perceived male figure is very short in human history. Alfred North Whitehead, another great world historian, in his book Adventures of Ideas, talks of flashes of freedom. Through the human civilization story, we see these moments of where societies are embracing this freer thinking, or this sense that they have a new way that is based more on human rights and human dignity. These are flashes of free thought, but then the door is immediately closed, and we return to these authoritarian, almost totalitarian figures. It's what I called last week the totalitarian temptation, that we want freedom. It's there, but somehow we never want it enough, or the forces of sort of order and law and an iron fist eventually return. And that is what I call the spell of the God King. The fact that we will see after 399, as you look at all different kinds of human societies, you will see this pattern. And it's represented something like this. This is a painting that comes from actually the Americas, just near Mexico. And it's an image that was drawn on a cave about 9,000 years ago. You can go into a cave and you can see a very interesting power structure, power dynamic at work here, even in the Americas, even across the Atlantic Ocean that had no contact yet with the part of the world I've been describing. Here we have the ruler holding a staff. He's dressed usually the best, but he also is the one who is giving orders to those who are lined up, coming to see him and paying him tribute, supplicating to him on their knees. You know, what will you allow me to do? What food will you give me? What decision will you actually pronounce for me? It's the master and sort of slave relationship, if you will, which is that the ruler, the male ruler, is the one to whom we look for our decisions. The spell of the God King is something that we see in so many parts of the world as we start to move towards the Christian era. This is from Africa. This is an image of an African ruler in an African country around 2,100 years ago. Here we see a divine figure, a regal figure, holding the gold. And the sun shines on this individual. Just like the Egyptian pharaohs, the sun would shine on them. And we see this idea everywhere we go of this individual, whether we're in the Americas, whether we're in Africa, whether we're in India, whether we are now in China. Because that's what you're looking at now. And I'm going to speak to a moment about China and how they approach their power. We are under this kind of spell that our leaders have some sort of close connection with the gods or God. And they're the ones who are the source of all of our food, all of our sustenance. And the ideas that Socrates had brought to us, Plato and Aristotle, have largely disappeared or have been sidelined. And we are now back to this idea of the God King, but even in greater force. This is a picture from a museum in China of just one soldier. It's an actual sculpture of a terracotta warrior. How many have ever heard of the terracotta warriors from China? You have. Okay. Does anyone want to tell us what they know? Feel confident telling us what they know of the terracotta warriors? Because you're looking right now at just one of them at a museum in China where we can see all of the terracotta warriors today. Does anyone? I can go default for a moment, but we'll go. I saw Avery Rose, Olive. Anybody? How about online? Does anyone want to jump on their microphone and tell us what are the terracotta warriors? Because there is no greater story that speaks to the spell of the God King than the mandate from heaven that the Chinese gave to their rulers. And it is a remarkable story of being under the spell of a God King. China, more than perhaps any other culture, has had this. And we see this in this little story I'm going to tell, the terracotta warrior. You want to try? Yes, that's right. The terracotta warriors, 8,000 of them. 8,000. So I'm just showing you one. Terracotta warriors. Terracotta. Beautiful baked sort of earth. Imagine taking that earth, preparing it, and sculpting 8,000 of these figures, 6 feet tall, 5'10", 5'9". Each soldier, each warrior is based on a person that the sculptor was sculpting to. So if you took every one of those warriors and we turn them around and look at their faces, we would see 8,000 slightly different looking warriors, slightly different height, all dressed in the attire that they would have to be dressed in as the guardians or warriors, the men who protected the first emperor of China. The idea of an emperor comes from China. I would love to show you for about 6 minutes part of a documentary that can explain this, takes you into a tomb, but I'm concerned about copyright infringement right now, so I'm going to try and explain this to you the best I can. But I'll put the link in the live chat and you can look at this later. But if I show this documentary up here now like this, then in just 6 minutes of it, I'm going to be hit for copyright infringement, but I could share the link with you and you could all watch it alone here, but I'd rather tell you about it and you can watch this later, okay? Essentially, the idea of an emperor goes like this. About 2,400 years ago, again, we're in this period, sort of just around the end of the Athenian or Greek Empire, and as we're moving towards the Christian world, and we're seeing this idea of the God King being adopted increasingly by so many parts of the world, there was a very strong warrior, brilliant general named Shi Huangdi. And I'll give you the spelling, okay? He is the person who created the beginning of China. Shi Huangdi. So it would be SHI and then dash HUANG and then dash D. Shi Huangdi. Di. That's great. Shi Huangdi. Before there was Shi Huangdi in China, there were no emperors. The idea of an emperor or an overlord of a huge empire is something that has largely come from China at the beginning. But it's an idea that's going to spread and be adopted by the Romans. It will be adopted by in many other cultures, even in the Americas, but the Romans will definitely adopt this soon. The Roman world and the Chinese world were connected through roads. Remember that east-west axis I showed you last week of the latitudes of, part of Europe is over here, Asia's over here, not a lot of land masses in place. Eventually there'll be a huge network of roads called the Silk Road system that will connect this. But there were already some very early contacts between the Chinese world and the European world at this moment in time. So we can say someone like Julius Caesar, who is our most legendary emperor, and all of us know that, he can, to some extent, thank the Chinese for this idea of an emperor. What is an emperor? Well, the terracotta warriors can tell us a lot about this. Shi Huangdi, who became the first emperor of China and the first emperor really in human history of a great empire, he was a military man. He wasn't a poet. He wasn't an artist. He wasn't somebody soft, if you will. He was a violent, smart, dominating individual who through conquest united many warring states, many small states that were what comprised the Chinese world up until his time. He united them through brutality, formed a united China, created a language, and such was his power, such was his military intelligence and glory, that he too is believed to be divine in the way that the Chinese saw him. They saw that he had a mandate from heaven, that his ruling power came from up there. And whatever he said, whatever he did, once he consolidated his power, was coming from not him, but from somewhere else. That this is the God King, but in a kind of Chinese version, developing into this idea of an emperor. Such was his power that his body has not yet been taken out of its tomb. His tomb is known. In fact, in the past 50 years, his tomb was discovered in China. This tomb dwarfs the idea of what the pharaohs did with the Egyptian pyramids. The pyramids in Egypt were places to bury one pharaoh. And those pyramids, those massive structures that we can see today, technical wonders of the world, were much smaller than what was built for Shi Huangdi. What was built for Shi Huangdi is called a necropolis. It's a wonderful word, necropolis. Necropolis. It's a city underground. So he built for himself, as his tomb, an entire city, necropolis, that we're beginning to discover, a necropolis, a city underground, stretching underground largely about 15 square kilometers. And what we recently discovered were the soldiers that he took to his grave with him to protect him in the afterlife. That's what the terracotta warriors are. In his life, He was able to command the resources of China to such an extent that when he went to his death, he had buried around him 8,000 of these terracotta warriors. Each one is a work of art in itself. And we are now discovering all of these warriors underground. We're pulling them up. That's what you have seen and heard about in exhibition, are these warriors that have been shown to humanity. But there are more. We will discover more. He took with him 8,000 at least lifelike warriors. Why would he do that? The Egyptians, Tutankhamun or King Ramses or any other pharaoh, they just took their objects and they had their gold and their sacraments. And of course, they were mummified so they could live forever. They didn't do this. We're talking, he took an army with him to his grave. Here is a very, very important question that we must ask ourselves about the spell of the God King. Why would a God King do this? He's dead. Maybe he thinks he's going to live forever. It is said that Shi Huangdi may have died from poisoning himself with mercury, drinking the stuff because he wanted to be immortal. And in the end, it started to eat away at his guts. And that's a theory. Most God Kings do want to live a long time. Immortality is what they... And I think I told you a little bit about hearing recently Vladimir Putin in Russia telling the Chinese premier how he'd like to live to 150. But in this documentary, you will see the cameras begin to go down into this necropolis, but not very far. The Chinese authorities will not let them go any further. They found the spot with their technology. They know where Shi Huangdi is buried. They can see where he's buried through the technology that exists today. But they don't want to go down there. They want to take the warriors, they want to take the things that are from there, but they don't want to disturb his body there. So why would Shi Huangdi do this? This tells you something about power for humanity that I'm going to try and kind of encapsulate for you in a few words, but let's see what you think. What is the point of taking so many men to your grave? Your army to the grave? To protect you from the souls of all of who you wronged? You're close. You're very, very close. He obviously wanted protection in the afterlife. He wanted to ensure that he would be able to live forever. But at the same time, it has been said, Aaliyah is not wrong, that it's possible Shi Huangdi also had a bit of human fear in him. Did I show you the body of King Ramses lying in Egypt today? I usually do in the story of civilization. King Ramses was the great Egyptian god king who was a pharaoh who ruled for more than 50 years, one of the great pharaohs. He was mummified so well that you can go see his body today lying in a museum in Egypt, the real King Ramses. King Ramses was a human being. We see that when we go and look at his body, the corpse. There he is, a human with sort of slightly golden hair because the Egyptians like to dye their hair and put tattoos on their bodies. And like we do today. They were cosmetically very sort of sophisticated. I'd like to show the image of King Ramses to show you that he too is a human, and that the idea of a god king is something that we humans have created. There is no such thing as a god king. There are only humans who believe in more and more power. It's possible that Shi Huangdi felt something of what I saw scribbled on the Tower of London. The Tower of London is a place where you go in London, England, and it's where many of the rebels who fought against the British kings would be taken, and they would be held in jail. They would be tortured. They would be held in prison for fighting against the British kings. That's where Socrates would have been taken if he had been living during the time of the British Empire. Somebody wrote on a wall in the Tower of London these words. I took them down when I visited the Tower of London. So this is my own research. Somebody who had been a prisoner in the Tower of London many centuries ago wrote these words down while they were an inmate there. Almost like Socrates writing some words down. Graffiti. An evil conscience makes men afraid, even when safe. Let me read this so this registers for a moment. An evil conscience makes men afraid, even when safe. Is it possible that Shi Huangdi knew that he's going to be dead? He definitely was a human. He understood that when he dies, he won't be breathing anymore. He's gone. Why would he need all of these soldiers there when he knows he's safe already? He's dead. An evil conscience makes men afraid, even when safe. It's a beautiful line. Somebody, Socrates-like, a rebel in England, I don't know who, graffiti, the Tower of London, a prisoner held there for fighting against a corrupt state, a state that likely would have said, be afraid, everybody, be afraid. Think about the world today. How many of the leaders tell you, be afraid of the immigrants, be afraid of the economy, be afraid of the future, be afraid of nuclear weapons, be afraid of your own life? Maybe they know something about how to control us. Many of us are afraid. But the ones who use that fear to control us may be the most evil of all. Does that make sense?
So it's kind of like COVID, right?
Yes, kind of. If you think that the science was wrong, if you think that vaccines don't do you any good, if you think that there's no such thing as infectious disease, yes, I would say. But if you know, as I could show you, that infectious disease has been a force in human society, that vaccines have saved humanity. Polio is one example. Measles and smallpox, for example, that decimated the American world because the Europeans brought over all of these plagues. You will see that later, to the indigenous peoples who were vulnerable. Had they had the indigenous peoples access to vaccines to control smallpox and measles and whooping cough and everything, there may never have been the millions that died in the indigenous world. If you know all of that and you still say, like COVID, then I would say maybe you have a point. But I think you might not be aware of how important science has been and how good vaccines have been. And you may be under the belief that the science was creating fear. Our politicians were, but the science was pretty clear. People were dying. COVID was spreading. It was contagious. Vaccines that we developed very quickly helped us to control it. Well, let's explore this for a moment. This is excellent. Okay. That means that you are among those who didn't die, and that can happen. Doesn't mean that many people still were dying, but there were some who didn't.
But the government and society put it out of proportion to the point of, like, if you died from a car accident, they were marking that as you died from COVID.
Well, would you be prepared to come up and talk more about this? Because this is a free thinking, critical mind that is doing exactly what Socrates would have loved. And I suspect what this person in the Tower of London would have loved is she is saying to the authority figure, which is me right now, hey, you might not be right in what you're saying. And I'm going to tell you what I think.
You're probably a lot smarter than me, though.
I'm not so sure about that.
Always don't follow authority.
Would you please come up and say this to everyone? Because I'm going to make a point for all of you about awakening to power and about the spell of the God King. What's your name again?
Kayla?
Kayla? Kayla is under no spell.
No, I don't follow gods and the government, and I have a lot of awakening of my own power
So,
through meditation.
wow. I was planning to get to India today to show you about how meditation began through a thing called Buddhism and how that power is very, very great. But there's so much. I just want to make sure that I got you for at least what we're talking about. And the critical stuff is this. 3 minutes, and then we'll conclude. Kayla, when you have a problem that's presented to you, or something that's bothering you, or something that you're angry about, or something that's making you uncomfortable, or something that you're just trying to figure out, how do you decide what to do?
I usually don't. I'm very indecisive.
But then when you need to make a decision, who do you turn to?
Connections, people, conversations, writing. Writing is a big thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Writing is a big thing. What is one of the greatest inventions of all in human society? I barely was able to touch on it. It came out of the Mesopotamian world. That was, you saw cuneiform, the ability to write things down. And why, when you write,
You see things
you see things
differently.
It's okay. Well, I'll plug it in. Keep going, okay? I'm gonna fly solo for a moment, but I may crash. I may lose the battery power, but I want to make sure we get this. This is a critical moment. This is a human being, a free-thinking, critically minded, brave human being saying, well, when I want to figure it out, well, I use my own brain. And how do I do that? I write some stuff. And I write. And then I look at it, and then I start to analyze it. And I think, well, geez, maybe I've got a good idea there. And sort of like that.
Yeah, kind of. Because like through my writing, I've been able to notice like self-destructions and like family traumas and bonds that were brought on to me through society. And I don't believe in the government, and I don't believe in the technology that we keep creating because we're destroying the earth.
But you believe in your own mind because your own mind is on display right there in front of you with the written
Yeah.
word, don't you?
Yeah. But it also takes a lot of work and patience and tolerance and sitting with yourself. You have to really go from within to get that connection.
Socrates said, an unexamined life is not worth living. This person is living an examined life.
I'm a very good observer too.
Anything else you'd like to add about the power of being able to see your own thinking in front of you? Because that is what writing is. We do it so often now. We've lost
We don't write
its
anymore.
meaning. We do with machines and machines, but it started with taking what was in our head, talk in our head, and putting it onto something so we could see it. And that way, the human word became the power to order our chaos. This comes from Northrop Frye, a great literary critic at University of Toronto. She is ordering her chaos through the human word. And if she left it all in her head, it would be overwhelming. So you put it down in front of you.
Yeah.
And you read it. And then you put it away for a few days. Let the paint dry, as we say. You come back to what you wrote, and suddenly what you were thinking is giving you wisdom. And it's just you, talking to you. Is this making sense?
Mhm.
That's power. That's awakening to power. That's the modern human being on planet Earth.
I don't follow authority anyways, so I'm good.
Thank you very much, Caleb. Thank you very much. I need to stop, and my battery power is still there, so this plane is still flying. We haven't crashed. There's a lot more I can talk about, but nothing beats being able to take history, take historical developments in the human story, and put them right into the human being today to show you that there's a living, breathing example of a critically minded, free-thinking, Socrates-like, courageous person who can figure things out for herself. Thank you very much. We have to thank others in history who've allowed us to see this. Does anybody have any questions, anything like to say before we sign out from here today? And I'll see you in 2 weeks, Olive.
I did actually want to point out another thing when we were talking about just what was going on with this. With the fact you can see how well crafted these are, isn't that just another level of power that the emperor would be able to show if someone did back in that time came and found this? Like,
Yes.
What would you think if you came in and saw 8,000 of these like faces? Just what would be your immediate reaction if you saw so much of that, so well sculpted, and it looks like they're ready?
More fear of the emperor. I can tell you that.
They
A
have
lot
to
more
be
fear.
Gorgeously well done. This is like, and the fact that you can still see like
The feet, you see the soles of, I know, it's beautiful. It's, look at the detail. Can you imagine this?
you can still see the ancient paint. Like you can see the still red
Hello.
lines of the scale armor.
You're looking. That's why I chose this picture. So you can see.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I know. Imagine 8,000 of those.
I was so lucky.
And had you been around then and you were chosen to work, around the clock to do one of those, you would have been honored to be the slave of the emperor. Such would have been your awe of the emperor's power. I can tell you one thing, Kayla would have said to the emperor, she just would have laughed and that, yeah, give me a break. She won. I'm going to do this for you. What are you going to do for me? I'm the same as you are. I'm just a human being. Then you would have had your head very quickly removed.
I also want to say, now that since each of them is so well sculpted to the point you can see each of their faces, like I would also feel like all 8,000 of those soldiers would have felt like insanely honored to be able to be
Yeah.
part of this. This would have been such like a royal decree.
Yes,
That's not the right
that's
word.
right. No, Olive, you're on the right track. That's the idea. That's the idea. You would have been honored. Same with any person chosen to create something for their God King. I got to let you go, and I know you all. It's it's Friday. You have nothing to do after today's class. Just make sure your name's on that list. You get the 5 out of 5, and I hope that you'll remember Kayla when you leave today. And I got to write it down. Could you spell it for me, please? Gurbir. Gerber. Yeah, Kayla and Gerber. Thanks, everybody.
I will admit, I went on like a long while just searching images of these. There's so many of them that have lost like the heads of them. Like there's so much.
Oh, you could find you'll see them all online. Okay, hold on. Let me check online. Everybody, Cosmos, make sure your name's there. We're concluding the class, and if you've missed anything, you can always watch the recording. Have a great midterm break. I'll see you in 2 weeks, and I look forward to reading your first assignment. I'm very backed up with marking, so I apologize if your discussion posts, I'll be doing that in the next 48, 72 hours. Excuse me. Take care. Let me save this. Got that. And stop the live